welcome to the second stage of this webinar series. We're going to look at take an advanced look at tasks. This is a follow-on from the introduction that I did a couple of weeks ago. It's now available online if you want to watch that back. We are going to extend what we did last time, look at making some of the processes a bit more user-friendly, and look at some of the advanced options that we've got. We're also going to look at some of the bits and pieces that we missed out last time and look at some reports and visibility, bits and pieces like that. But at the end, we're also then going to talk about, which is probably the most important, is how we actually apply this to your business, how you can, what the next steps for you, and how we can help and bits and pieces like that. Okay, so let's get started. So just a very quick review on what we did last time. We had a look and we created this process in Virtual Cabinet. So this process was designed for someone to take a document, select an approver, and we actually left it that there was a management group, so that's how I've got the task left at the moment. So the person that got the approval task could then approve the document or reject the document. If they rejected the document, the original task creator, so the original person up here, would get a review task. They could resubmit the task back for approval, which would automatically pick who was originally rejected the document, or they can cancel. If the document was ever to be approved, then an approval confirmation task comes through to the original person that asked for it, and they can then complete it. So we're now going to build on that, and I'm now going to use that example to show you some of the advanced options. Now, I'm not going to be able to cover everything. There is a handout for those attending the webinar for the full task documentation. That's also available on our support website. But I'm going to show you probably the most useful bits, and some of it will or won't be applicable to the tasks that you want to create. Okay, so let's have a look. So I'm just going to flick into Virtual Cabinet. Now, unlike the last session, I'm going to do this all as one user so we don't have to keep flicking back and forth. But I am going to pick up our process as it was from last time. So this process was called Document Approval Demo. And just like the diagram that we brought up, there were three tasks involved. So what I want to do, if we go back to our diagram, is I want to improve this rejection part down here. Because at the moment, yes, the person that's rejecting it can add a comment and a note, but they may choose not to. And there's no way of forcing it. So we'll look at improving that. We'll also look at improving this final stage here. Instead of just completing it, we're going to prompt the user to just remind them to do something. So let's do that and have a look at how we achieve that in tasks. Okay, so back to my task window, which is available in admin. If I look at my for approval task that we created last time, I open it up. I look at my actions, and I have my approve, thumbs up, approve button, and my reject button. So in this example, we're actually going to look at the advanced options. So there's this little button here, which brings a whole set of options down the bottom once you click it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to require the user to add additional information when they click this button. So I'm going to tick that option, and in here you can add some options separated by a comma. So in here I'm going to say something like wrong client, comma, spelling and grammar, wrong info, other. I'm also going to make the comment mandatory, but that is optional. So I'm going to save that. Now in my document approved task, all we did last time, if you can remember, is we just labeled the button finish and did nothing, and it just completed our process for us. And that's great, but what I'd like to do is just show them a prompt. So in this button, I'm going to tick this option. Instead of it being information, I'm going to actually pose a question. And I'm going to say, have you published this to the client? Okay, something else I'm going to quickly show you as well, and then I'll demonstrate the functionality in a second, is on the approval, I'm going to check an option in here to say that indexing must be completed. So I'm just going to tick that while we're in this screen to save us from flicking back and forth, and then we'll show what functionality that has in a minute. But I've done that on the approve option. So we've made some quite subtle changes there. While we're here, I also want to talk about the alert age and warning age, because I mentioned in the last webinar that we would come back to these. Now these are two icons that will show only in the reports area, but the alert stage is the whole process. So if this document approval process, all the tasks combined, take longer than 2 days, I want it to have a particular icon displayed next to it to show that we are getting near to exceeding that. But you might want to set a warning at 1 day. So you've got a chance of catching things before they go overdue as a business. It's really important if you've got time-critical client or supplier information that you want to deliver. I'm just going to save out of this now and run through the process. I'm going to do it again from just starting as task from here. Now last time when we left, we configured it to go to the managers group. I'm going to pick a due by date to be tomorrow. I'm going to click OK. In my case, as the admin user, I am part of the managers group. So this is all as it was last time. When I open it up, this time I'm going to hit reject. When I click reject, I get prompted with our options that we created, which is really nice, because not just nice to present the user with the options, but it makes it nice and fast for people to be able to categorize why they're rejecting it. In here I could say should be Dave, something like that. Click OK. What you'll notice is that when the review task comes through, that it actually gets stamped in the notes, the comments area with the completed reason, as well as the notes. You don't have to go into process history and go and look at a particular column. You can do that. Over here you'll see that it's reject, and it's got its own column saying wrong client. But it's quite nice, we've now made it so that you can actually see that in this chain as you're processing. If this goes several times around a loop, you'll be able to see the reasons why people chose to do them. So I'm going to correct that, pretend that I've corrected it, click resubmit, and it's come back for approval. You may look at it again, and this time we'll approve it. Now the option that I ticked on approve is not going to make any difference to this, and I'll explain why later. We've now got an approval notification. So in this case, this has all been fully approved, and before we just used to click finish and it would just finish the whole process. Well, what we've done now is when you click finish, is we've got a nice prompt that says, have you published this to the client? If I click no, then it doesn't do the action. If I click yes, then it obviously proceeds to do so. Now from that window you could have published via the portal by right-clicking on the document and publishing it. You could then answer yes. Unfortunately, there's no way of ensuring that that's done. You are relying on the user, but the question there is designed to prompt them to do so. So those are those extra features. So they are reasons and they are prompts. The other thing, and we looked at the warning age as well, but we'll see the impact that has when we look at reports. So the other option that I did on approve what I want to do is talk to you about something called indexing profiles. And these are really important. Traditionally with Virtual Cabinet, you can't file a document into a filing cabinet if it doesn't meet the mandatory requirements. So in a very straightforward common scenario, you cannot file a document into the client's filing cabinet without picking a client. So that's traditionally what we've had. However, with tasks, what we found is that potentially you might want to file a document into that filing cabinet and have someone do some of the filing, but then have someone else pick who the client is. It might be that your process of, particularly when you're routing post through the business, some of the filing can be done by one person and the rest of it, which is just allocating a client or maybe allocating a matter or a case number or a claim number if you're in insurance, or a property number if you're not too sure which property it's for if you're in property management. Those things, although they could be mandatory, you can use indexing profiles to start a task to achieve that. So I'm going to show you how to do that. I'm going to use an example, which I know some people that are on here have already asked about. So I'm going to use the example of a prospect letter, where I'm going to write a letter to, I'm just going to use a document in my intro, to a prospect, and I don't have a client code and name in my system for them yet, but part of this process will be to create it and then retrospectively complete that code and name. So what I've done is quite straightforward. We have something now called indexing profiles. So in here, I have a prospect letter that I've created. This is a new profile. I've said when anyone chooses this, it'll go in the client's filing cabinet. I have a document type called prospect letter, and it will do something called the status of sent, but we'll cover that later. What I do want it to start a task, which I've only got one in my system. This is our approval task. And you've got an option here. If you've got a single task for multiple documents, so if I was to highlight 5 documents in my in tray and pick this profile, then it would put 5 documents in one task, one process. All 5 would be in there. If you're doing a prospect letter though, I would assume that you would want 1 task per document, because if you had 10 that you'd write into 10 different prospects, when you pick this, you'd want 10 different tasks to allocate to 10 different clients. In our case, it's not really going to matter because I'm only going to pick 1 document. So let's save and see what the behavior is. We're going to come out of Virtual Cabinet because it does need to it does need to refresh that in the in tray. Okay. So I've got a document here in my in tray. Say that it's a letter. Up the top, you'll see that we now have select indexing profile. If I tick that option, because I've got prospect letter in here, it tells me along here that I'm going to have a document approval demo task created off the back of this. 1 task per document in the client's filing cabinet, prospect letter with status of sent. In this case, I'm going to pick it and index my document. Now, because it's got a task attached to it that requires some extra information, we are going to provide it, and we are done. That document has now been filed into the client's filing cabinet with no client against it, even though the client code is mandatory. It's only indexing profiles that can do that. In this example, if we walk through our process now, we have a document approval process, but this would probably be called a prospect onboarding process. We open this up. When we go to approve it, you'll notice that there is no client code in here. When we go to approve, you'll get an error saying, please finish indexing all documents before completing this task. That check is controlled by the option that we picked earlier. So to get past that, you have to re-index the document. And in this case, we have to pick a client. That's the only one that's mandatory. It will only be looking for mandatory fields to solve that problem. And now when we approve it, it moves on. and we can put it through, and we know that when it's gone past that stage, you have a client associated with it. So that's really good for that process, and as I say, post-routing is quite common for that to be used as well. And so if anyone's seen indexing profiles and weren't too sure quite what they are, that's what they were designed for, to allow us to achieve what we've just shown you there. Okay, let's have a look at some other bits and pieces. So last time I promised that we would look at reports and visibility, and then we'll move on to assigning. So reports, we'll take reports and visibility in one go, because there are two ways of showing the progress of a task. One is via the reports tab, one is via a particular index field that we can populate. So that's what we mean by visibility. I'm going to show you both those ways now. Okay, so let's just start a few tasks for a second. Let's just go in here. I'm also going to do is just to show you the different users is I'm going to change the for approval task to require a user to be picked from the group. You'll notice now when we start it, we have to pick admin or David, which are the two managers in the manager group. So I'm just going to pick one for David to show you. Let's go back in time. Okay, so we've got a couple of tasks on the go there. Let's move a couple on. And so we've got a few in there. Right, so we go to reports and we go to outstanding tasks. We've got a view here. Now it's important to understand that you can give people access just to the outstanding tasks report. They don't have to have access to the audit report, intro report, and portal report. To do that, it's probably worth spending a couple of seconds to show you how to control that. You go to admin and access settings. You will have a set of access settings in here that each user has a particular access setting applied. In my example, I will be the admin user. And you will spot down the bottom here that you can tick which reports. So if I just hide the intro report for now and go back in, you'll notice that the intro report has now disappeared. So you can just have an access process, an access setting that just shows users the outstanding tasks. However, you should understand what gets displayed in here. So in outstanding tasks, by default, it shows all current open tasks. Tasks that are completed do not show in here. They are stored, the history is stored against the document. So these are all tasks that haven't been completed. Now by default it sets it to all and process. If we hit this drop down list here, there are some options. You can see whether they're owned by me, supervised by me, with me as the worker, or created by me. Now the created by me is pretty straightforward. If you hit the start task button or triggered the task through whatever means, you will be the creator. The other options, just be aware that they're there, and when we talk about the assigning and the roles in a minute, it will make sense as to what those reports, how those reports help you see certain things. But in my case, I've only got one process, which is my document approval. So I'm not really interested in looking at processes. I want to look at the types. So as I scroll down here, I can see that I have one document approved, two ready for approval, and one ready for review. as I showed you in the basic one earlier, if you click on any of these, it will filter down the bottom. You have a view all task to bring it back. You can do any filtering on here. If you've got hundreds of tasks, you can filter just like you can on any other grid in Virtual Cabinet, and you can filter via some nice drop-down lists if you want. You can open tasks from here as well. So if we open one up, we could go and process it. But if we look here, we've got one for David. If we open this task, you'll see that only the worker or the supervisor can action this. I can't actually do anything with it. Okay, so that's fine. But what if I want a fast view of where a document is in a process? That takes some training, it takes some navigation, it takes some drilling down, and actually my normal use case of viewing documents, I'm pretty much in the search screen and I've got the document there. So my recommendation, if you want to expose this sorts of information to your staff and so they can track documents, this is great for management, by the way, to look at stuff. And in here, this column on the left here is where that alert and warning triangles come in. If you've played about with them and left them at 0, they'll all be bright red, by the way. It's to use, so we should use statuses. So what I've done is I've created a new index field. Now, give us a shout if you need help doing this. But I've just created everything in my client's filing cabinet. It's got a new field, number 5, called status, which I've set as not approved by default. What I can now do, which is a really nice feature, is I can state that when I approve a document in here, that I can actually set index 5 to be approved. When I reject it, I could set it to, guess what? Rejected. And also on my document approved, I'm going to take this button a stage further. Not only are we going to prompt the yes or no, but we're also going to state, call it published. Okay, so let's have a look at what that looks like now without using reports. Let's run through one. We'll have to do a new one because the old task that we'd already started won't have our settings in. So we'll start a task off with this one for admin. Open it up. Bear with me a second. Let's pick one. Let's just clear this down just so that you can see that it's actually working. That's just from a previous demonstration. Right. Let's pick this one. Set the due date to be the 29th so we can highlight it as a high priority. Okay, so you see that we've got a document here. Let's open it up and we will reject it. At this point, although that document has come back for review, over here, if I refresh my search, you'll see that we've got a nice rejected status against the document without having to go into reports. So you can do that on any button to do the process. You could then filter all documents that have been rejected. You don't have to be involved in tasks. You can just have it as a status as a company. I know that a lot of companies already have a status that they've been using saved searching for. And you could just leverage that in your processes so that users that are used to filtering certain documents can still continue to do so with tasks. It just keeps people up to date where a document is, and you can get a history of it because it's been fully re-indexed. I won't run through the other options because they're pretty straightforward. It's just going to update the status for us. Okay, so those are the features that I wanted to show you before we move on to the roles and assigning. So what do I mean by that? Let's go back to my presentation. We want to look at each of the roles that there are in Virtual Cabinet, and they're important that you understand what they are if you're ever to design any, particularly ones that you want to control who has access to things, who can go into a task that another user has got and reassign it, who can see the task but not action it, who can see secret buttons, because we've got the ability to do that as well, and bits and pieces. So before I actually define the roles, I just want to show you where that is actually, where that impacts it when you're designing it. So in processes here, we'll pick our for approval one because it's nice and easy. When you're choosing approve and then picking a task, you're in here in the assign to, you're picking the worker, which we'll talk about in a second. There are two other key roles that are really, really important that you understand: the supervisor role and the owner role. And we'll go into detail exactly what they are. But in here, you can actually pass that person through to the next task. So if you have a particular person that is the supervisor, in here, when you're clicking approve, you can go to role and you can pick the prior task supervisor. And that will make sure that the supervisor is the same the whole way through the process. And it's the same with the owner. You might say, okay, that still doesn't make a huge amount of sense. The supervisor is the person that can go in, look at it, and act as the worker, but isn't the worker. So they don't see it in their task tray, but they can see it in reports and they can action it. The owner is really useful if you want to, for argument's sake, I used it recently for a leave process, a leave form process, where the owner was the person, it was a very complicated one, but the owner was the person that started the leave request because it was their leave request. They could go into reports and at any time see the status of their leave request, but they certainly couldn't approve, reject, or touch any of the functionality. But it was really nice because in the reports, they could go into owned by me and filter the tasks that they owned. Okay, so let's look at the roles and what they actually mean. Okay, so we have the creator. So the creator is the person who initiates the process or becomes a creator when a task arrives in their intro. The creator generally doesn't change. You'll normally find that they're the person that caused the task to get created. So usually it's the person that begins the process. Not usually that useful unless you want to, at some point, 5 tasks down the road, take it back to the original creator. I personally would keep the creator as the owner and then use the owner. The worker. The worker is the person who has been assigned the task. This is the person or group of people, don't forget, that will see the task in their in tray, next to their in tray, so in that tab. And they'll be able to complete all the options, do as you like, and the options are fully customizable, and that's what we've been seeing over these last 2 videos. We've always been the worker, and we've been looking at it from that angle. So relatively straightforward. The supervisor has full rights to the task. They have the ability to perform all functions, which is reassigning, rescheduling. They can also action secret buttons that the worker can't see. So there is an ability when you create a button or an action to hit a tick box in the advanced bits that says hide from the worker. So you're probably thinking, well, what would you do that for? But you may turn around and say that in a particular task, if someone has taken too long to do it, you can go in and send it, push a button which will send it to a task actioned by someone else in the business, and then you can report off how many you've gone through that process. It's pretty useful. I haven't used it yet, but I'm sure it'll be useful at some point. The owner, as I mentioned, they're the person that has the vested interest. They see the documents and functions, but they can't action them. Typically, the owner will be used when automatically sending the document back and forth, or when they want to check on the progress. They don't get much more benefit than the status index updates, really. Okay, so that concludes the functionality of tasks. As I say, I haven't covered everything, but I have hopefully pushed and pulled it in as many examples as I can. And once you master that, then you can pretty much apply it to anything you need to. But the next step is actually deploying this and coming off of this webinar or watching this video back and actioning this within Virtual Cabinet. So we've designed tasks and we're trying to give you content like this webinar to make them, to make it so that you can deploy them yourselves. I will add that we're always a resource for these things if you need it. Please email support or your account manager if you need any assistance with any of these. But our advice is to start by identifying suitable processes. Now, suitable processes, from my experience, are processes that a document needs to collect information from different people or have people review or view that document. Anything that gets emailed internally within your business that's the same document is a really good candidate for looking at the process. So if you find something like that in your business, then just map it out. By map it out, I mean draw it out on a bit of paper, whiteboard, whatever, and I would try and create the diagram like we did and we looked at earlier, but I would also look at who you want to be the worker, the owner, and the supervisor at each one of those boxes, because it will massively help you when you come to designing it. Design, well, there's loads of resources on our support website. You've obviously got these tutorials, but again, please, you know where we are, and educate. So obviously once it's up and running and you've tested it, and don't forget, you can add yourself to a group and just use that group to test it, so no one will even know you've got tasks within your business. As soon as you turn it on for everyone, which you can do via group membership, then the ideal thing is that you present your staff or the people involved, the key stakeholders in that process, with that diagram. So I don't know, use Visio or some form of diagram tool. A pretty good one is Xmind if anyone needs to put a free one together. But to go through that diagram and also train them in how to drive Virtual Cabinet tasks, and you'll probably find that people will suggest other tasks that you can do within your business. So with that in mind, what I've done to try and help you think of some of the things that you could use tasks for, I've come up with a list of tasks that people have done and are in are live on people's sites at the moment. We have ones in all sorts of different industries, and we have one site that has over 30 processes, pretty much running most of their business processes as they're document driven. But some of the key ones that we get asked for all the time are, if you're an accountant, tax return, because that's a key one where you're collecting a pack of documents over a period of time, resulting in the publishing of that pack to a client for signature. There are lots of other examples in different industries that use the same process, but that's a common one. Leave forms are basically multi-stage approvals, client onboarding, fact finds for the financial services. This is quite a straightforward one, but this is where you can have 2 or 3 different departments that bring different elements in. I'm not going to walk all through those, but case management and incident management and claim management for insurance. There's some people out there using some pretty cool processes that they've designed around those as well, where a particular case, incident, or claim type, for argument's sake, comes in and they want a certain set of steps to happen, and that is not managed within their core business system, so they use the virtual cabinet processes to take them through those. Okay, so that concludes the webinar. We've got a lot of people on and listening, so thank you very much for attending, taking the time out to listen.